What is happening, friends? Today I'm going to be showing you or telling you what my top 10 movies of 2021 are. Given the fact that we are approaching the very end of the year, if you can believe, we just ended 2020 and now we're already ending 2021, which is scary. 2021 was a phenomenal year for movies. It's a time when movies actually started playing back in theaters pretty regularly, which is really awesome to see as long as everybody's staying safe. And because of that, I was able to go ahead and see many movies in 2021, and these are my top 10 favorites. One little disclaimer, I of course did not see every single movie that came out in 2021, so if there are movies that are on my list that aren't on yours or vice versa, feel free to let me know down in the comments below what movies are in your top 10 list, because I would love to hear them, and plus it'd give me some recommendations to go and check out myself. So with all of that down and out of the way, let's get started. Coming in at number 10 is Encanto. I just saw Encanto a couple weeks ago, and when I initially watched it, I ate it up. I really enjoy it when movies kind of beg these questions, ideas, and themes that are pretty relatable to my own life, and I think Encanto really sold that for me. The whole idea of essentially the family dynamic and what kind of pressure it puts on family members, how families recover from those things, and how pressure like that just builds and builds and builds over time, and it can eradicate your family when you least expect it. I know that's kind of a cryptic, dark way to kind of look at it, but the movie just portrays it so well that I couldn't help but really eat that up, and it really spoke to me. Plus, it helped me try some things culturally that I wouldn't have been interested in otherwise, so there's that as well. Coming in at number 9, Ron's Gone Wrong. This actually just came out on Disney Plus not too long ago. I was watching it the other day. Ron's Gone Wrong, was not expecting it to be nearly as good as it was. I came out of it giving it a 9 out of 10. I thought it was an amazing movie. It's because of the fact that this movie really broke down what it was to be a friend, what exactly friendship is, how do you define friendship, and it interweaves it into this really clever story about how you kind of grow up and you learn that friendship isn't all about just you. It's about you being able to contribute to everyone else around you. It really hammered that point home. It was fun for the whole family. There were some good laughs to be had. Plus, it had a lot to do with technology, which I am a sucker for. And it really just got the gears turning in my head, got me thinking. For those reasons, Ron's Gone Wrong came in at number 9 on my list. Coming in at number 8, which was earlier in 2021, Nobody. If my memory serves me right, Nobody came out in March when it was still pretty cold out, and actually no one was really in the theater. I think I was one of 3 people in the theater I went and saw it in, but I just really enjoyed a John Wick-esque film with Bob Odenkirk and Christopher Lloyd just destroying everyone in their path. This movie was shockingly bold. It was shockingly in your face, shockingly violent, shockingly gruesome, and all of that just amalgamated into this really awesome experience that I really enjoyed. And plus, it really stuck with its DNA. It didn't try to be anything crazy. It didn't try to be anything out there. And they really did a great job of selling this idea that Bob Odenkirk is playing an unsuspecting guy who wouldn't be nearly capable of anything that he's done in this movie, but here we are, and it made for an incredible watch. And I actually have to go buy this on 4K when it's on sale while I can. So for those reasons, Nobody came in at number 8 on my list. Coming in at number 7 is No Time to Die. Daniel Craig's farewell to James Bond, I think, was given a very worthy send-off in this case. I gave this movie another 9 out of 10. I thought it was quite amazing. I know a lot of people didn't quite feel as strongly about it as I did. However, there's a few reasons for it. 1, the great send-off for Daniel Craig. 2, I think the movie did a great job of keeping me really entertained through its entirety. It took directions I didn't know it was capable of taking with characters I didn't even know existed until the movie started. And plus, it keeps you on the edge of your seat for the entire about 2.5 hours that it runs. There's nothing worse than a movie that is that long that's also really boring, but I didn't actually mind the fact that this movie was 2.5 hours because it was so much fun to watch. The action was killer. Daniel Craig was great. And the supporting cast around him was also phenomenal too. Was the villain in No Time to Die really all that great? Not particularly, but for me, I think everything else was so great in the movie that it made up for that. So for those reasons, No Time to Die came in at number 7 for me. Next up at number 6 is Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho. This movie did something that I very rarely see movies do, which is cross multiple genres and do so successfully by sticking the landing and making really a cohesive experience. Last Night in Soho was one of those those murder mystery films that was also a thriller. It touched upon a lot of different ideas like mental health. It had really likable characters. This movie really had it all for me, and it was another masterclass for Edgar Wright that I had been really looking forward to. And it was so good to the point where I actually want to go out and watch some of other Edgar Wright's projects that I haven't seen yet, including Baby Driver, which is actually sitting over there in my case that I'll be watching later on this week. But Last Night in Soho had it all. It had great performances across genres, great characters, a great story, even some surprise twists and turns that I never saw coming, and it just made for an awesome movie that I can't wait to watch again. Coming in at number 5, another movie that came out a little bit earlier this year, A Quiet Place Part 2. A Quiet Place Part 1 was pretty legendary, but A Quiet Place Part 2 continued to build upon everything that was great in the original and just elevated it to a whole nother level. And to boot, Cillian Murphy was in the movie a lot more than what the marketing led on, and it made for a really pleasant surprise because he crushed it in the movie as another main character. Between him, Emily Blunt, and the kids who are in this movie whose actors' names I can't remember, I feel bad about that, I'm sorry. But again, the movie just had you gripping your chair on the edge of your seat and your heart was pumping like crazy the entire time. It told a great story, and the way the movie was executed, I wouldn't be surprised if we got a third Quiet Place because it was just amazing. And I also really enjoyed the fact that the movie kind of went into the origins of these aliens. It really fulfilled my curiosity because it's something they never really answered in the first Quiet Place. Needless to say, John Krasinski, Emily Blunt crushed it, and I look forward to A Quiet Place Part 3 if it happens. Coming in at number 4, the epitome of summer movies, Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. I'd heard a lot of really awesome things going into Free Guy. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it after watching it, and honestly, after watching it for the first time, I really enjoyed it, but I wasn't blown away. Then the very next day, I decided to go watch it a second time, and that movie just blew my lid off because it was quite amazing. Ryan Reynolds obviously crushes it. Jodie Comer's real-life character in the movie and her love interest, who's played by an actor I should remember, but I cannot remember his name. I had to look it up. I couldn't help it. Joe Keery. Jodie Comer and Joe Keery did a really great job of being supplements to Ryan Reynolds in this fictional world. Their story and their whole concept of creating artificial life, I thought really worked well for me, and also their kind of love interests for each other, or I should say Joe Keery for Jodie Comer in this movie, really also landed for me. I thought Taika Waititi was a little overcooked as a character in which the way he was written. I like Taika Waititi in and of himself, just not the character as much, but it wasn't enough to like kill the movie or anything for me. I know he's playing a caricature of video game executives, and for that, I really appreciate the movie overall. I had some great laughs. There's one in particular I won't spoil here because you got to see it for yourself. You will die of laughter. It's fantastic. Free Guy was an amazing summer movie. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to watch it again very, very soon. I just wonder if they'll get a sequel. Curious. Coming in at number 3 is Spider-Man No Way Home. This movie just crossed the $1 billion mark. I just talked about that on the Coffee and Kernels podcast for those of you who are interested. This was the best Tom Holland performance I've ever seen, and this was in my top 3 for Marvel movies, and I'm not sure about if it's my favorite Spider-Man movie or not. I should clarify because I gotta go back and rewatch all the Spider-Mans to be sure. However, I gave this movie another 10 out of 10. Maybe I was a little bit too kind to it. However, the movie just made me feel in a way unlike I had felt at all in 2021 aside from Dune. Tom Holland gave a phenomenal performance. The movie was a lot heavier. It was a lot more of a mature take on Spider-Man that I myself had been craving. I don't generally like to do that going into the movies. I like to go in with no expectations, but for me, I had always been kind of yearning for a more mature Tom Holland Peter Parker, and this movie really sold that well. To me, this was ultimately the telling of a coming of age story as Peter Parker transitions from his high school life to his collegiate life. You see him grapple just with the unthinkable in so many ways throughout the entirety of the film, and the way that it keeps you entertained for the entire 2.5 hours was second to none. The supporting cast was great on top of it. There's a great story to be told. It was a lot of fun. It still stuck to its comedic roots while also still telling more mature subjects, and it struck that perfect balance between the two that's so hard to nail down in the movies, and it made me feel just unlike I'd ever expected to feel walking out of a Spider-Man film. And to me, it was just head and shoulders above Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. Coming in at number 2 was Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Dune, I had no idea about going into it. The only thing I knew about Dune was that it had a lot of hype from sci-fi fans, and it had really great trailers. Other than that, I went in blind knowing nothing about the franchise. I walked out with an experience like I had not had at all in 2021. Everything in this movie was near flawless. In fact, it was the first movie I've ever given a 10 out of 10 between its score, between its excellent world building, the performances. My dude, Timothée Chalamet, was godlike in the movie. And to boot, the supporting actors and actresses also all gave really great performances. This movie was a true cinematic experience. And by me watching it in the theater on the big screen, I felt the score of the film in my chest. It was stellar. I ate it up. I had no idea what I was getting into walking into the movie. I walked out a changed man at minimum, because now I think that Dune has got to be in my top 3 for favorite sci-fi films of all time. It was spectacular in every way. Jason Momoa was really great in it. Timothée Chalamet was great in it. Oscar Isaac was really great in it. Josh Brolin was really great in it. It also told a really great story about father and son. It also interweaves some other interesting dynamics between mother and son and conflicting factions. The way that they built this conflict between different worlds, different peoples, was just phenomenal. I also didn't know that it was only Dune Part 1. I didn't realize that going into it. Now I cannot wait for Dune Part 2. And I'm especially looking forward to seeing Zendaya a little bit in Part 2, because I don't think we got very much of her in Part 1, and I was a little surprised given how much she was put into the marketing. So if you haven't seen Dune yet, do yourself a favor, go watch it. It's spectacular. Coming in at number 1, my favorite movie of 2021, Judas and the Black Messiah. Yay! This was the first movie I remember seeing in the pandemic era, aside from Tenet like 6 months earlier. In fact, this was so early in 2021. This is actually before I even started reviewing movies on YouTube. That's how long ago I saw this movie and how early in 2021 it came out. Judas and the Black Messiah, I could go on about for days. First of all, the execution and storytelling is phenomenal. And when you pair that with excellent actors in Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, who, if they don't have Oscars already or Academy Awards, I gotta fact check myself on that, but they will at some point in their careers, because both of these guys just shoot this movie to the moon. And it's really funny seeing Lakeith Stanfield have such a successful career after getting a start in Atlanta with Donald Glover and Brian Tyree Henry. It's kind of fun seeing his career take off like this. But Judas and the Black Messiah was just a phenomenal retelling of a historical story of events going on in Chicago 20, 30 years ago. And what's really even more striking is that they had to portray these people who were in their early 20s and dealing with all these monumental subjects like racial injustice and other big topics, all trying to live their lives. The sacrifices that they make, the fact that this is a story of betrayal, the fact that this is a story of the government against the people. It's just told in such a way that makes your skin just crawl, gets your heart pumping, because this is a really intense movie. I would call it a borderline thriller. It's a story unlike I had ever seen before, told in a way that I haven't quite seen before. It's dark, it's gritty, it's very mature. There's also some love and endearment in there. This movie's got it all, and it was far and away my favorite movie of 2021. All right, friends, so that does it for my favorite movies of 2021. There are 2 honorable mentions that I had to leave off the list because I can't fit them all in here, but they were The Mitchells vs. the Machines and also The Suicide Squad. That's James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. The Mitchells vs. the Machines was a really surprisingly awesome movie for me, and it was on Netflix. Given that Netflix's movies are pretty hit and miss, I was pretty skeptical, but watching it, it's again one of those animated movies that came out this year that really got my head kind of turning. It got me thinking, and it was a great family tale. It's about this coming of age story of essentially the entire family and the sacrifices that they make for each other, how their adolescence shapes who they are, and things along those lines. And when they interweave it with really fun technological things, I thought the movie struck quite a great balance and made for really great fun. And I gave it a 9 out of 10, and it's just outside of my top 10 list. And it broke my heart leaving it off the top 10 because I enjoyed it so much, but those calls got to be made. And then also James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. I thoroughly enjoyed The Suicide Squad. In fact, I watched it the entire weekend that it came out. I went and saw it in theaters, and I watched it like 3 or 4 more times on HBO Max that same weekend. I've been craving a much more mature take on superheroes, supervillains, what have you, and I think The Suicide Squad was really told in that particular vein. It was just very different. It was very funny, it was very comedic, but it was also very dark and very violent, and I love all of those things. All film is subjective, of course, and for this movie to hit my subjective love for things, it created this beautiful bond where I'm like, this has got to be one of my favorite superhero, supervillain movies that I've seen. It was just out there. It was different, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. It didn't make a ton of money at the box office. That's just kind of how the cookie crumbles, but for me, it was one of my favorite movies this year. Friends, we've made it to the end of the list. That will do it. If you guys are interested in seeing any reviews that I've I've done for these movies throughout the year. I'll link them down in the description below so you can check out my full thoughts on them. However, one thing to note, for movies 8 and 1 on my list, I actually watched those movies before I started doing reviews on YouTube. So I don't have a video detailing my full review and thoughts on said movies. Just keep that in mind. What makes your top 10 list of 2021? What's in your honorable mention? Whatever your thoughts are, you know exactly where the comment section is. Let me know. Thanks for sticking around the channel for another awesome year. Or should I say my first year. It's been very special. I've learned a lot and I have you guys to thank for that. Friends, thanks so much for watching another Bankrupt Hippo video. If you like this, click right here if you'd like to see more. I've been Bryson. Until next time, Happy New Year's.